Hi everybody, on this episode we will learn how to set up a custom airbrush for rocks and debris that will help us save a ton of time when animating explosions, like this one. So let's begin. The first part of this explosion consists of an orb of light imploding rapidly. For that, I'll just paint a circle on a few frames until it disappears. This will be followed by a rotating line acting as a lens flare. All of this quick animation will be on a folder, followed by another folder in which we will draw the main explosion. For this explosion, we will start with a big burst composed of two main areas, the core of the explosion, or the silhouette, and the inner parts of the explosion to create a more three-dimensional shape, with shadows and a bit more of contrast. The next frame will be similar, just with small variations, pushing the entire shape outwards. I also decided to include a couple of flashes to separate the first part of the animation from this one. One black frame and then another white frame with a black silhouette of the environment. These will serve as impact frames, although they are way too simple to be called that way. Now the third frame will shape what will become the final stream of energy moving upwards into the sky. For this, the cloudy shape of the explosion will rest at the top of the column as the base starts to transform into a cylinder. We must do all of this as we draw the inner shapes and the shadow areas of the explosion. We do this for every next frame, making the stream of energy thinner, giving the entire scene a sense of propulsion. After that, we can proceed to color every frame in another animation folder. As an extra, I create a new darker layer on top of the rocks that only comes up after the impact frames, darkening the area for more contrast. And I also added a new animation folder on top of everything, changed the blending mode to glow, and then I use an airbrush to paint a gradient on top of the explosion to create a radiance effect. Now, for the main part of this video, we need to draw some rocks and debris flying around the explosion. However, drawing all of these rocks individually on every frame takes a lot of work. As an alternative, we can create a custom brush with a group of objects we can draw in advance. So here I will just draw 7 new rocks. For brushes, I would recommend to do the line work and fill them up with white. That way you can paint everything afterwards depending on the situation, but for this example and to make things easier, I'll just paint everything with gray and will add the shadow directly. With all of this finished, we need to select every layer individually. We go to Edit, Register Material, and Image. This will allow us to register every drawing as an individual material. Here we have several choices, from repeating them as patterns to scale them up and down, but what we need to toggle is the option Use for Brush Tip Shape. This will allow us to use this material for our custom brush. We just select where we want to save our material and press OK. We do this for every single object. Now we need to create a custom brush. For this, I went into the airbrush tool, right-click on droplet and duplicate it. I did this because the behavior of this brush is very similar to what we want to accomplish. It is a repetition of different objects just rotating and scaling automatically. I named this new brush Debris Airbrush and press OK. Now we go to the brush settings and we can see all of the tip shapes assigned for this brush. I just select them all and delete them. I started to add new ones. Here we can select the tab Create Material and it will list every shape and drawing we have registered previously. We select one of our rocks and press OK. And we do this for every other drawing. After having all of our materials assigned as tip shapes, we can start playing with the settings of the brush. The angle of every object can be affected by the tilt of your pen, or randomly assigned by the software. But more importantly, in the section Spraying Effect, we can choose the density of the particles and the option Spraying Effect. If this setting is not selected, instead of having different rocks spread over the area, we will have a continuous string of objects tagged over each other. This can prove useful in concept art and quick environment design, but this time we want random rocks appearing everywhere, so let's keep this setting on. Now on the section stroke, we can modify the gap of the brush. Too big and it will spray only on the borders of the brush. Too close and they will appear just one on top of each other. Try to adjust this until you get an effect that you find visually appealing. Another important setting is the repeat method. It can be completely randomized, or you can have the shapes cycle every time you click on the canvas. Again, this will all depend on the way you use your brush. I use the cycle option to be able to get a new set of rocks every time I use it. Now with our brush complete, we can just go to our animation and start using it. We create an animation folder on top of the explosion. We start placing the rocks around it. This looks way too bright under these conditions, so I decided to add a black layer clip to this animation folder and lowering the opacity until I got the tone that matched the environment. I started to add rocks frame by frame, making them follow the general shape of the explosion. Now, this wouldn't be so useful. These rocks will just look like a bunch of random sharp rocks appearing around the explosion without too much sense of movement. So to fix this, I just add a motion blur effect on every single frame of the debris. For the first 2 frames, I use a radial blur effect because the explosion is projecting outwards. And in the next one, I use a directional blur effect in a vertical direction. This will give us the motion movement that we are looking for. After all of that, this is how it looks. This will be useful whenever you have to add a lot of repetitive objects that don't require too much attention to detail, and it helps to make the scene more dynamic. And that's it. I hope all of you found this useful, and you guys can check my animations on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Goodbye.